Welcome to this week's Hymn of the Week. This week we have ELW 685, Take My Life That I May Be. The text by Frances R. Havergal was written in 1874, and we have documentation and writings from her to tell us exactly why she wrote this text. From her writings, we have, she was visiting in December 1873 in Worcestershire. She wrote it on February 4th, 1874, but here's what she says. There were 10 persons in the house, some unconverted and long prayed for, some converted but not rejoicing Christians. God gave me the prayer, Lord, give me all this house, and he just did. Before I left the house, everyone had got a blessing the last night of my visit. I was too happy to sleep and passed most of the night in praise and renewal of my own consecration. And these little couplets formed themselves and chimed in my heart one after another till they finished with ever only, all for thee. So what's interesting is we have this longing from Frances for people to find Christ. Then very likely they are finding Christ, and then she's responding in praise with this hymn. And that's interesting because it all connects when we begin to start taking this apart. Let's start with the text. You have take my life, take my hands, take my voice, take my intellect, take my lips, take my feet, take my moments. So it's about body, mind, soul, heart, spirit, everything. It's the whole self. So it functions as sort of a litany. And that leads to my next point, that the music was also selected in a way, I think, to make it seem like a litany. So let me tell you about William H. Havergal. William H. Havergal was an Anglican priest, and he unfortunately had a carriage accident in 1829 where he fell off. He had a brain concussion and eye problems, so he had to remove himself from the ministry. And during that time, he studied hymns. He studied writings. So I can see, at least, from researching it, when he retired after going back to the ministry in the late 1860s, he was writing tunes again. And in fact, this tune was composed in 1869, probably one of the last years of his life, as you see here, to 1870. So what's interesting here is all that history leads to this. William H. Havergal was Frances's father. And so she wrote this tune, as I mentioned earlier, in 1874. So she drew on his wonderful music composed in 1869, or wonderfully composed music arrangement from 1869. So what's interesting there is we have Frances that does know about music. If you go page through the ELW and look at On Our Way Rejoicing, you'll find another hymn by her. So she definitely had a music background. She was picking this music for a reason. And I really see it lining up with that idea of a litany and praying. Let's look at the music. There's a lot to share about this hymn. It starts with this first line, right? And then the second line starts on the third, but basically is the same movement. Not an exact, okay? And then the third line's completely different. But then the fourth line is a variation of one. So it adds some eighth notes, but generally it's a variation of that same movement. So we have variations of that, and then we have variations of what she's writing in prayer and praise, and about the whole self being given to Christ. I view that as a wonderful formula for a prayerful litany. And so that's how I'm going to try to, or be challenged to interpret it as an organist. I don't want to change too much because I think that loses the feeling of the prayer and the litany. But I do want to make slight changes in texture to bring out some of the text and things that may, for me, be powerful in the writings of Frances. So here's Take My Life That I May Be. So at the end, I chose to really have the last verse, not loud just because it's the last verse, but loud because this was a hymn that, or full, I would say, this was a hymn that was composed in praise. People found Christ, and giving can also be joyful as we ask God to take our love and pour at his feet. We're giving it all away. There's a joy in that. And then also, at the end, by reducing the sounds just ever so slightly and getting softer, it reminds us of giving things up, how we also become lighter, and how we feel more at peace when we have less. And that's something that I think God is continually trying to teach me, and I try to keep learning. So thank you for listening to Take My Life That I May Be. Thank you very much.